Good morning and welcome to Teaching Topics with Mr. Damaris. Today we're going to go over 3 different ways to indicate pauses or breaks in a sentence. We'll talk about commas, ellipses, and dashes. For those of you who care about the Common Core, this is 8th grade Language Standard 2, subsection A. Now a comma, like all punctuation, is very useful. Alright, commas are the most commonly used means of separating out ideas in a sentence. Not the only way, as we'll go over later today, but a comma is very useful. Now a comma indicates a pause of some variety. This can be a pause between 2 clauses or thoughts, a pause between parts of a list, or a pause between a big idea and a detail about that idea. And I'll give you guys a second to read that over yourselves if you're so inclined. And moving on. Our first example today is the simple sentence, George likes working to earn money. If you want to make a compound sentence out of this, you add a comma, a coordinating conjunction, and a second idea. So our complete thought is George likes working to earn money, comma space, and Lenny likes owning pet rabbits. Note the comma there. This comma separates the 2 clauses, remember clauses are thoughts, that go together to form the sentence. As I said, this is a compound sentence, which is separated by a comma and a coordinating conjunction. Now with lists, you use commas to separate the ideas there as well. So in the sentence, George wants money, happiness, a place of his own, and room for Lenny to have all the rabbits he wants. You note the 3 commas placed after the 3 first items on the list. Item 1 is money, item 2 is happiness, item 3 is a place of his own, and item 4 is ended with the end punctuation, that is, room for Lenny to have all the rabbits he wants. The commas go after each item on the list. They separate the first item from the second item, the second from the third, etc., etc., etc. And you end a sentence, obviously, with end punctuation. You never put the comma before the idea. Now, comma is the most commonly used way of separating lists. The other big idea is a semicolon, but we'll deal with that some other time. Now, when it comes to extra information in a sentence, we have this sentence, for example, George, like Lenny, wants freedom and happiness. Note the commas around the extra information in a sentence, namely the phrase, like Lenny. These commas separate out the extra details that are not needed for the sentence to be a complete thought. They're good details, but the sentence survives without them. So if you rewrote it and just simply said, George wants freedom and happiness, you see that it's still a complete thought. It is still a complete sentence. But it simply does not have the extra information that used to be within those commas. So you always put the commas around, before and after that is, the extra information that could be removed from the sentence, but is still useful to have for extra detail. Now what if, for example, your extra information is at the beginning or the end of the sentence? Then you put the comma either before, at the end of the sentence, or after, at the beginning of the sentence. So in the sentence, I think George should enjoy the fun things in life, like Lenny does, the extra concept that Lenny also enjoys the fun things in life is not needed for a complete thought. So if you remove it and simply say, I think George should enjoy the fun things in life, and stop the sentence there, it is still a complete thought. It is still whole and entire within itself, but it doesn't necessarily have the extra detail. So, as I said, commas provide spaces between thoughts, items, and details in a sentence. And we're moving on. Our next set of punctuation is the ellipsis. That's E-L-L-I-P-S-I-S, or ellipses, es at the end instead, as plural. An ellipsis is a series of 3 dots, periods, used to indicate a pause or a removed piece of information. And it looks like this, 3 dots together. You use an ellipsis to show a pause in dialogue, a break in the action of a sentence, or a missing piece of information in a sentence or quotation. So for example, if you have a character in a story whose voice sort of trails off, or they're thinking, and I don't know, you use an ellipsis instead of the end comma in the quotation. You could just as easily have Ruby say, I suppose so, comma, close quotation. But it's better to have her say, I suppose so, and have the voice trail off with an ellipsis to demonstrate that she's saying, oh, I suppose so. The ellipsis replaces the comma that would usually fill the end of the quotation. Remember, by the way, punctuation goes inside the quotation mark to show that the voice trails off. Another way, if you have somebody talking and you say something to the effect of, it's not like we promised, the voice trails off again, you use an ellipsis at the end of that quotation. And then the next character can jump in and say, but we did, cried Jane as she stared wildly across the room. But yes, see how the dialogue pauses or trails off? You use an ellipsis for that. Now, if you have, as I said before, a break in the action of the sentence, you can sometimes use a comma there or even a semicolon, but an ellipsis is a better idea. So if Jade paused a moment, reflecting on her course of action, what should she do? That pause, that thought, that moment where she's considering her actions, the ellipsis shows the break in the action of the sentence. It replaces the semicolon for a more dramatic or emphasized pause. We'll consider our third example here. With looks of determination in their fiery eyes, Jade, Jane, and Ruby dashed from the room, leaving their fears behind them. ... Now, we have ourselves the ellipsis indicating missing or removed information, used here for dramatic effect. Rather than saying what they do next, we simply let the sentence trail off and leave the reader wondering, well, what do they intend to do now? Where are they going? What's happening? You hopefully noticed, by the way, as I was writing, if not, here it is, a fourth period there. If you end a sentence with an ellipsis, you must also end it with a period. Otherwise, it's just like ending a sentence with a comma or a semicolon. It really isn't right. You are leaving the thought incomplete. This punctuation can also be used quite handily when you're doing quotations for research, or if you're doing a paper for school and you want to say what somebody said without using every single word they used. You can cut out the extra information from a sentence, provided you do not change the meaning of the sentence, and replace it with an ellipsis to shorten the quotation you use for your evidence. So for example, in the sentence, this showed that Brown, despite her advanced years, could easily climb a mountain just like when she was young. You have the concept that you really want to focus on here, that Brown could easily climb a mountain, and all the extra stuff around it. So if you want to shorten that sentence, you simply write in, this showed that Brown, ellipsis, could easily climb a mountain, ellipsis. And now that you're ending it, you put the end punctuation after, which is a period, and close the quotation. You'll see that you have all the important stuff, namely that Brown could easily climb a mountain, but you are not necessarily including all the extra details you didn't want to waste your space with. Your big idea remains, but you remove the extra information that's just going to clog up your works and burden your reader with information they do not want. And we are moving on again. Our third punctuation set is the dashes. Now there are three different types of dash. There's a hyphen, an N dash, and an M dash. They're nearly identical because frankly they're just three little short lines, but they serve three different purposes and they're three different lengths. Now the hyphen is just a short, direct little jot of the pen. The N dash, that's EN, is a little bit longer. In fact, it's named after the fact that it's the length of a capital letter N. And the M dash is the length of, yes, a capital letter M. Now a hyphen connects hyphenated words, which are usually hyphenated adjectives or hyphenated nouns. These are words like well-made, big-eyed, old-fashioned, mild-mannered. All of these things are descriptors, but they have two different parts that are held together with the hyphen. Hyphenated nouns are usually things like nationalities, so Italian-American or Franco-Prussian. Ideas that are two combined locations held together for one identity. If you want to write really fancy sentences, you can include hyphenated adjectives that describe hyphenated nouns. So a mild-mannered Irish American is a hyphenated noun with a descriptive hyphenated adjective. Isn't that exciting? Woo! Alright, so the woo was in fact more exciting than the sentence itself, but we'll move on from there anyway. The second type of dash is the N dash, remember that's EN, that replaces the word through in lists and dates, and that's all there is to it. So if you're writing something like July through October, or pages 27 through 54, you use an N dash to replace that in writing, if you're so inclined. This is slightly longer. As I said, it's the length of a capital letter N, so however long you make your capital letter N, just make your N dash that length. And the third type of dash, the M dash, can be made even longer, within reason, for effect. Shows a separation of ideas. It's like a mix between a semicolon and a parenthesis. Remember, a parenthesis is a singular half of a parenthesis. You can use an M dash alone or in pairs. So for our first example, we have the sentence, Charles, with great effort, pulled himself over the edge. Now you could separate this out with a comma set. As I said, this is extra detail, which can be removed with the commas. But here we use M dashes because it can be separated out clearly, you can remove it without ruining the sentence, and it looks better. It indicates a greater pause of thought. If you have, just like with comma, information at the beginning or the end of the sentence that is extra, you can use an M dash there as well. Charles breathed deeply as he rose to his feet. He was free at last. This sets apart the extra information at the end of the sentence. Now if we combine all three skills, commas, ellipses, and dashes, we create some well-made sentences with excellent grammar and truly exceptional, dare I say marvelous, punctuation. You'll notice that in that sentence, I used M dashes, a hyphen, and ellipses. A sentence that includes well-placed hyphens, finely used M dashes, like these, and thoughtful ellipses for added mystery or pondering will earn you grades that will go down in history. Adjective well-placed, the M dashes separating out like these, and the ellipsis that ends the sentence before the period to show that the voice trails off, the idea continues, and we're not complete. We are, however, complete with this video, and hopefully you learned today how to write commas, ellipses, and dashes properly. The end.